Why did we come up with this recipe for freezer jam? First, I like all different kinds of jams and jellies and a lot of things that comes from fruit. I've bottled in the past, but the one jam that just was better as a freezer jam was strawberry. If you went ahead and bottled it, it was okay, but it was never as good as freezer jam. And so I wanted to have a different way to make freezer jam is how this whole thing started. Since then, we found how we can make all different kinds of jams using the freeze dryer. So I tried several different attempts. In fact, got a quick video that I found on the internet. I didn't have any of my explosions, but I'm guessing many of you have had similar experiences. And this is a little bit what will happen if you are trying to just put the jam or the jelly that you made into the freeze dryer and push the start button. You can see that it expands way too much. And this is a good hour of cleaning. So this was clearly not the way that we really wanted to do it. So we had to come up with another method. And I kept thinking of what's the problem with freezing jam? Well, it really is just sugar content. There's so much sugar that's in jam that the freeze dryer, even at -20 and -30, is not cold enough to give it solid enough that when it pulls the vacuum, it's going to expand, or think of it as micro boiling. And so as it boils, it creates that foam, which goes everywhere. And so we came up with a better way of doing it. And it starts out with making a puree and then freeze drying just the puree, and then using that puree to store as a puree, or you can mix it, but the sugar is added after you've already freeze dried your product. Now, I have a quick video that just shows how I make the puree. I'm using a rather large berry press. It's actually a tomato press with a fine sieve, but a Victoria strainer or almost anything else will work. This is the Victoria strainer, and you'll notice I'm just throwing these strawberries in. Now, I have washed all these strawberries very well, but you notice I didn't de-stem them, I didn't take the leaves off them, I didn't take anything off of them. Now it's flowing through there, flows through that little froth coming to the bottom, and underneath that I just have a 5-gallon bucket. And I run until I get about 4.5 gallons in it. Now this is going through the second time. And the reason I do it twice is I found there was quite a bit of good juice still left on it. But what you will notice in the output bowl, there was very little that was left that wasn't the leaves and the seeds. I also found this gets about 80% of even the strawberry seeds. And then once I get the puree, I just put it into the trays and put it into the freeze dryer. And the next is how I get them into the bags and how I store them. It's really simple. I don't use parchment. I don't use silicone dividers. I don't use any of that. It does make it a little easier to get out, but I found it's just easy enough. It's not that big of a deal. So this came straight out of the freeze dryer. You can't tell from this, but they're actually still warm. These are coming out, and this is minutes after I've taken it out. Pre-freezing saves you time, and it also makes it easier to not have it bubble over. The other you can do is lower your freeze time and just put it in and add a couple of extra hours. The other one is I don't use a blender to blend up on these because they're very soft. I just grab it, put them in the bag, and there's not a lot of air in there, so you're not injecting air like a blender would be adding. And that is just a rolling pin, in fact, made by a good friend of mine on his lathe. So nothing fancy. I'm just getting most of the air out of it. And so what I found the easiest was I just take that bag, stuff it into the Mylar bag.
So you push it in the bag.
Just push it in the bag and then turn it upside down. Everything else I've done, I found I have this strawberry cloud flowing around the house. And then I take this and I dump it into this. So I use what I'm going to want and I just put in one of these. They're sealed. This will hold a little bit more than what's in one of these bags. So in this jar, I can get about 17, 18 pound equivalent of strawberries.
So strawberries or strawberry puree?
Strawberry puree. So I think now it's easiest probably just to show how to make the jam.
Yeah.
We'll start with the ingredients. And I'm just going to put them in a single bowl. So this is just a half cup of regular sugar put into that bowl. This is 3/4 cup of exactly what's in here. It's just a strawberry puree. You can almost see, even from letting this just sit out, it had like just a little.
It's already sticking to your fingers.
It's sticking to my fingers. It's little, and I actually mix that in with that. So I mix all my dry ingredients. Now the next one I use is Easy Gel, and this is a modified cornstarch. Now a lot of people are worried, modified cornstarch. This is the only cornstarch that I've been able to find that is a non-GMO derived product. This is made from what's called waxy maize. It's actually an ancient corn, and it won't crossbreed with all the hybrids and the others that have been mixed and all the GMOs. So this is made by taking that corn, and because it's instant, they kind of puff it up a little so that it goes. And if you're using this, it's important to understand that this mixes a 1-for-1 for weight with cornstarch, but because it's fluffed up to be an instant, you use twice as much by volume.
Okay, so because of the air content.
Right, because they basically expand it out. The other reason I use this is that this will thicken product without heat.
Okay.
If you have regular cornstarch, you're going to have to bring this to a boil before you can get it to.
So this replaces the pectin part of.
This is replacing the pectin part that's in it.
Okay.
And even when you're doing freezer jam and you do pectin, you'll notice you mix it with your water.
Yeah.
You bring it to a boil, and you try not to add it to the end.
That's the right.
But again, you're adding boiling water to your fruit, which does cook it just a little. And this is variable. This is half a tablespoon that I'm adding, and you can change that based on the thickness that you want. Half a tablespoon gives me, think of it as a thick syrup, maybe a little bit like honey. If you want it as a full jam, then you're going to want to go thicker. The next item that I add is I add citric acid. I do half a teaspoon. This is to give just a little tartness to it. Again, you can kick this up to a full teaspoon if you want a little bit more tartness. And then, as you can see, it's just all mixed in there, and then I just mix it dry. And it is important to mix it when it's dry, because remember, you're dealing with an instant thickener, and you want the thickener mixed up with the sugar and the others, so it's going to thicken all about the same level.
So did you say that you're doing the Easy Gel for a syrup right now, or for?
This is going to be a syrup. At the end, I did a syrup and I did a jam, and I'll show you about how thick they are.
Okay, so the only difference between doing syrup from this recipe and jam is more thickener.
That's right. If you double or triple the amount of gel, you're basically going to set.
Okay.
So I'm doing this at half a teaspoon. I have some in my refrigerator that I did last night, kind of getting ready for this, that I did at half, and I have some that I did at 1. But you can go clear up to 1.5
for super thick.
if
jam.
you want it really thick and you want it to be like a jam that you have to pull off. And the other advantage of using this is cornstarch is way cheaper than pectin. Pectin has gone through the roof in the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And I have found this works. And this comes, it's stable. And even if you weren't doing it this way and you were making it, you're making freezer jam, I actually like using this over the pectin anyway, because it stays stable while it's freezing.
So you, in some of your recipes, you've replaced pectin with Easy Gel.
I have.
Okay.
In my regular recipes that I'm going ahead and just like freezer jams.
And does it have any shelf stability difference, or?
It actually is very high stability in the freezer. Okay. I'm not talking where you've water bathed them and the others. FDA is very clear on which thickeners you can use when you water bath something, because their times and everything and pressures are calculated with how well the heat travels through the product, and you're doing that as part of the storage. So you can now see that this is just incorporated. Okay, the next thing I'll do is put it in the jar that I'm going to put it in, and
funnel.
And that's my large funnel. And then the final component that goes into this is water, and you want to add me just a knife or something. The knife will work.
Yep.
And you're basically going to, this is 1 cup, and I have found making the water
Okay.
slightly warm makes it mix a little better.
Just dissolving better.
Yeah, it
The
just
easy gel
dissolves
needs
a
to
little
dissolve,
quicker.
right?
What was that?
The easy gel needs to dissolve, right?
Well, actually everything needs to dissolve. This needs to dissolve. The sugar needs to dissolve.
That's true. The sugar.
Everything just mixes. And this is not hot, but this would be what you'd call warm. I'd say no warmer than what you take a shower in.
Yeah, it's a cold shower.
Yeah, that would be cold because it's been sitting here. But you'll find that that makes it a little bit easier to mix up. Now, this will take at least about 10 minutes to fully rehydrate for the sugar to mix in. And when you first look at this, you're thinking, man, that's pretty thin.
Sure.
I know you wanted syrup, but this actually will thicken as it cools. Now, the one thing to remember, this is all fresh products. It has not been cooked.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're done with this, and this is about done being mixed, that's it. So the time to make this is, I don't know, call it a minute. And then I usually will just put a lid on it. And then I put it in the refrigerator.
I'll go put this close to the camera so you can see.
Now, while you're doing that, I'll get out.
You can see it's very liquidy.
Very liquidy. This was the exact recipe I made last night.
So which one?
Well, we'll find out. And you can see that's holding. So this is that recipe because you can see how it's moving, and you can see this one's not. In fact, I'll turn it over so I don't dump it on.
It almost sloshed out.
It will almost come out. So this is a half a teaspoon, and this is 1 teaspoon.
Okay.
But you do need to keep it cold because you haven't done any heat processing. It's like the day you picked them.
I'm actually going to show this so that you can see the consistency here. Got before it was very liquidy. And now as I'm shaking it, it doesn't slosh around as much. But this, I've got to shake it to get it off. But I actually like that consistency.
So, well, now you said you have to try it. So
That's true.
you can only try it with.
So would you always mix these separate? In this example, you had all the ingredients separate and then combined it. Is there an issue having the sugar, the strawberry powder, the easy gel, and the citric acid together? So if I wanted to pre-mix, we'll say I want to pre-mix a month worth, but I only want to take out a week at a time.
And so it's easy.
I can store them all like in this pre-mixed strawberry jam, and then heat up water, dump it in that small amount.
And you don't even really need, if you're going to eat it right away, I wouldn't even bother heating it up.
Okay, so in fact,
so
the easy gel
this is not warm. This is cold because it cooled off while we were doing it.
But the easy gel doesn't require warm water to activate.
No, not at all.
Okay.
The warm water was basically to help the sugar dissolve.
Okay.
Because you'll notice it dissolves a little quicker. If you've ever added water to,
does hot water mess it up?
No, it just makes it go a little faster.
Okay.
Mixes a little better.
Okay.
You're mostly trying to get the granulated sugar to not be granulated.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason you even have it warm.
Okay.
And it does help the strawberry. But again, I don't know. Taste it and tell me what you think as far as just mixing.
No, that's fine.
And then this one is the same, but it has twice as much citric acid. See if you can tell that. You probably want another spoon.
I'm going to rinse out my mouth first so that I can.
So you can tell the difference.
You said this was more citric acid?
Twice.
Yeah, I like less.
I was doing several experimenting, and since I was using them to show thickness.
But the consistency I like.
That and this will be the same consistency after this goes to the refrigerator. If you're making just a small amount, you can see what it's got to pretty quick.
And this one? What's this one?
This is just twice the amount of.
So it's thicker.
It's just thicker.
Okay, so the only difference here is that.
Well, it has the same citric acid.
As the same as that. Okay.
So it's just thicker.
Yeah, got it.
And these are more of a preserve than a jam. If you want, you can go higher, but every time I've made a really thick jam,
Mhm.
none of you guys ever would eat it. You would
Yeah.
go for the thinner, the syrups.
Yeah. It's a whole lot harder to knife it out of a jar.
And it is easy to just
And
take it and squeeze it.
I think that preference over the flavor and texture preference sometimes wins out, which
Right.
is funny because
So-
we're trying to emulate the flavor and texture. So this is the one that you just mixed.
This is the one we just mixed. And I'll do one with,
Your citric. Yeah, I don't like the citric as much.
yeah, so I'm putting that one on mine. And by the way, it's a question of you want a little bit because it'll make it taste fresh. Too much, you actually have to add quite a bit more sugar to balance it. I was curious of how much I could get away with. So there's your homemade bread. And this was actually made with fresh ground flour that grew in my field.
The bread. I was say, wait a minute, I don't remember flour in the jam.
It was no, the bread has flour in it. Flour, yeast, salt. There's not much else to it.
I know my kids love it. Yeah, I like it.
This is the recipe that I've liked the most, and I think you like the most.
Yeah, my kids
That
do
much.
too.
You might even go a little bit less easy gel for thickening
Yeah.
if you want it to be thinner. But this is pretty close to what I've done. Now, the other one you can do that's a different, you'll notice that I added 3/4 of a cup of strawberry powder.
I'm gonna wash my fingers
If
off.
you want to have a chunky strawberry jam, then what you do is I'll take some of this and just kind of crush them in my hands and add them to my measuring cup and then add powder to fill in the rest. And so you can decide.
I do like chunks in there.
And a lot of people like chunks, and that's how this gets put in.
And remind me, I'm trying to remember how long it takes to reconstitute those inside of the jam, or do you reconstitute them first?
I would give this at least half an hour
Okay.
of
And
soaking.
do you do it separate?
No, I'll just mix them all in the powder.
Okay, you just put it on the.
I mix them with the powder. I break them into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
You don't want pieces that big, but it's just literally as I put them in, I'm just crushing with my hands, putting them in, and then adding the powder to come up with about the same
So
volume.
the same thing I do with like if I put them in cereal.
Yeah.
I'll just crunch them up.
Just crunch them up and throw them in. And I'll actually add just a little bit more powder because this is way more concentrated than that is. And I can always keep 2 or 3 years of this puree without a problem. My goal is to rotate it at between 5 and 7 years. It should be gone. This is the kind of stuff that I go faster, but it's just rotating continually.
Yeah.
And because it's freeze dried, it is going to last 20 years.
Yeah.
So even if you miss by a factor of 2 and you're coming on 14 years later, this is still going to make a strawberry jam.
This is fresher than even freezer jam.
It is.
Well, I like these. I definitely. I'm not a sour person. My oldest kid, she'll eat lemons raw.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. But I like the consistency. Has this thickened up anymore? I'm curious if it's changed. I would say it's just it was when I showed it before. It was probably 80%.
Yeah.
To what this is now. But
That
this
is totally spreadable. You
Yeah.
can see it holding. And that's, as I say, that's a squeezable.
This is still squeezable. I actually like.
And that will thicken
squeezable.
in the refrigerator. If it's not in the refrigerator, it'll be closer to this.
Yeah.
So if you're planning to use right away, that's about it. And you say you like the thinner.
I do like the thinner.
I have found I put it in the squeeze bottle, but I actually do a little bit like, the old mayonnaise squeeze bottles.
Yeah.
You just shake it down a little and it squeezes out just fine.
Yep.
And this is what will be in the refrigerator. This is what right after you mix it. And again, easy
And I
to
think
use.
the other reason that we liked it slightly thinner than normal jam is because whether we're putting it on ice cream
Yes.
or something else, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
I don't have to
you're
have a
putting it
jam
on like a
container. I
syrup.
don't have to have a syrup container. I don't have to have separate containers for each use.
Yeah.
So, and this, it's good on the bread. Our kids love it.